The sea was calm, too calm for what was about to unfold. At dawn on October 3, 2025, a supertanker named SS Freedom Star, carrying crude oil worth $248 million, moved steadily across the southern Caribbean. It was supposed to be an ordinary voyage until a Venezuelan warship locked its radar on the ship and fired. In the next 9 minutes, silence turned into fire. Missiles streaked through the sky, alarms screamed across the deck, and 2 stealth fighters hidden above the clouds prepared to strike back. What began as a single warning transmission would become one of the most intense maritime incidents of the decade, a confrontation that tested international law, precision warfare, and the limits of human restraint. Was it an act of defense, a tragic miscalculation, or a warning for the future of naval security? This is the story of how precision met provocation, and only one survived. The Caribbean is beautiful when it's calm, but calm seas can hide storms that change history. It was October 3rd, 2025, just before sunrise. The southern Caribbean Sea shimmered like liquid silver under the first faint light. To the untrained eye, everything appeared peaceful. The slow rhythm of waves, the distant cry of gulls, and a tanker moving northward toward the horizon. That ship was the SS Freedom Star, a 110,000-ton American supertanker hauling more than 3.2 million barrels of crude oil, valued at roughly $248 million. Her destination, Houston, Texas, the beating heart of America's refining network. For her 32-member crew, it was another routine passage through international waters, a well-known corridor stretching between Trinidad and the Venezuelan coastline. Yet beneath the surface of that calm voyage, tensions had been rising for weeks. After the crackdown only a month earlier, U.S. naval forces had intercepted several Venezuelan-flagged smuggling vessels, 4 carrying narcotics, 2 moving undocumented passengers. The joint operation dismantled an illicit network valued at nearly $600 million, striking hard at one of the region's most profitable underground trades. Washington called it an act of maritime law enforcement. Caracas called it a violation of sovereignty. The aftermath was swift. Venezuelan coastal commands doubled their patrol density, deploying missile-equipped frigates and surveillance aircraft to guard what they considered exclusive waters. Diplomatic cables filled with warnings and denials, but neither side wanted open confrontation. The Caribbean, however, has never been a sea that forgives miscalculation. An ordinary morning turns hostile. At 05:30 a.m., the Freedom Star maintained steady course, 45 nautical miles off Puerto Cabello, well outside any nation's territorial boundary. On her bridge, Captain Walter Hayes, a composed 58-year-old former Navy officer, reviewed routine checklists, engine temperatures, radar sweeps, cargo stability, nothing unusual. Far away, in a Venezuelan coastal airbase, a C-212 Avio reconnaissance aircraft lifted off into the pale sky. Its mission, surveillance and data relay. Flying at 4,500 feet, it swept across the maritime corridor using low-altitude radar and thermal scanners to identify large vessels. At 06:18 a.m., its operator reported a contact, massive, slow-moving, emitting a commercial beacon, marked U.S. registry. Within minutes, coordinates and live images of the tanker streamed into the Venezuelan Naval Command Center in Caracas. The data was clear. Cargo, 3.2 million barrels crude. Crew, 32. Flag, American. The response was a single order. Intercept and verify. Proceed at combat readiness. The Guayre Avante 2400 moves in from the naval base at La Guayra. The frigate Guayre Avante 2400, a 2,500-ton missile warship built for coastal defense, powered up its twin diesel turbines. Within minutes, it was cutting through the sea at 28 knots, its radar dishes rotating in slow, deliberate arcs. The crew on the Guayre were professionals, trained to enforce patrol zones, not to start wars, but orders were orders. The ship's commander believed he was about to confront an intruder. On the Freedom Star's bridge, Captain Hayes watched a new signal appear on radar. Faint, distant, but closing. He had seen this pattern before. First surveillance, then challenge. Below deck, communications officers established a secure link to the U.S. 5th Fleet Command, transmitting position and contact details. The official report was simple, but chilling. Unidentified military vessel approaching, range 25 nautical miles, presumed Venezuelan origin. Unseen guardians in the sky high above the clouds, invisible to both sides, 2 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters from the carrier USS George Washington were already on station. They had been part of Operation Mariner Shield, a patrol mission ensuring the safety of global shipping lanes through the Caribbean. From 31,000 feet, their sensors mapped every radar pulse in a 200-mile radius. The pilots saw the same thing Captain Hayes did, but from the heavens. The F-35s held their position, silent, waiting for the rules of engagement to authorize response. No shot would be fired unless hostile intent was proven. For the moment, the skies remained quiet. The confrontation. By 06:28 a.m., the Guayre had closed to within 18 nautical miles. Its fire control radar painted the Freedom Star's hull with invisible light. On the radio came a transmission in accented English. "This is Venezuelan Naval Command. You are entering restricted waters. Stop immediately for inspection." Captain Hayes' reply was calm and measured. "This is Freedom Star, U.S.-flagged commercial vessel. We are in international waters and maintaining lawful course. Any hostile action will be treated as an attack." For nearly 20 seconds there was nothing, only static, sea wind, and the low hum of engines. Then, without another word, alarms blared aboard the Guayre. The first missile launched, fire on the horizon. A streak of silver tore through the dawn sky, an automat Mk2 anti-ship missile, traveling nearly 700 miles per hour. On the tanker's bridge, Hayes shouted orders. "Hard to port, 27 degrees." The Freedom Star groaned under the maneuver. Every ton of crude shifted inside its tanks. The missile's heat signature closed in, then diverted slightly, missing the starboard bow by a handful of seconds. The detonation struck the sea with a thunderclap. A wall of water 20 meters high erupted alongside the ship. Steel vibrated. Containers rattled. Sirens screamed. For a moment, the crew thought they'd been hit. Then came the realization they were still alive. But they also knew the next missile might not miss. The sky awakens above the cloud deck. A new command flashed across encrypted comms. Hostile act confirmed. Engage per ROE Section 3. Inside the F-35 cockpits, the pilots' heads-up displays flared crimson. They switched from passive to active targeting. The Venezuelan frigate that had moments earlier fired its first missile was now a glowing shape on their infrared screens, a bright predator unaware it was being hunted. As the Guayre's crew prepared for a second launch, they never saw what was coming from above. A split second of silence. The ocean fell into an eerie pause. Even the Freedom Star's engines seemed to hesitate. Captain Hayes stood motionless, eyes locked on the horizon. His crew waited for impact, or for rescue. No one knew which would arrive first. In that breathless stillness, the battle for the Caribbean's balance of power had already begun. Foreshadow of retaliation. On satellite feeds far away in Virginia and Florida, analysts watched the event unfold in real time. Every radar pulse, every voice transmission was logged and archived. Commanders understood that a single wrong interpretation could spiral into a geopolitical disaster. Yet at sea, decisions come faster than diplomacy. The Guayre's radar reacquired the tanker. Its second missile tube was arming, and just beyond the thin line of clouds, the F-35s descended. Their stealth systems still cloaked, their targeting computers already synchronizing. They would not strike until the next hostile launch was confirmed, but once they did, it would be over in minutes. End of the beginning. Down below, the Freedom Star's crew secured hatches and prepared lifeboats, though none dared abandon ship. They could feel vibrations echoing through the hull as distant thunder, jets breaking sound barriers above the clouds. At 06:39 a.m., the sea and sky were poised on the knife edge of escalation. No one yet knew that within the next 9 minutes, a warship would vanish, a spy plane would fall, and the course of Caribbean maritime security would change for a generation. But in that moment, standing on the bridge with the smell of salt, smoke, and fear in the air, Captain Walter Hayes understood one thing clearly. The storm had arrived, and the world was watching. At 06:39 a.m., the gray clouds above the southern Caribbean opened like a curtain, and out of that silence descended two streaks of controlled fury, F-35 Lightning IIs from the USS George Washington Carrier Group. For 10 long minutes, they had watched the drama unfold from 30,000 feet, listening to every radio exchange, tracking every radar pulse. Their mission had been defensive observation until the first missile from the Venezuelan frigate Guayre Avante 2400 broke the rulebook. Now, the engagement protocol shifted from monitor to neutralize. Eyes in the sky. Both aircraft, call signs Viper 1 and Viper 2, were already armed with precision air-to-surface munitions, AM-120 AMRAAMs and GBU-53B SDB-2s. From their altitude, they could see the spreading column of spray from the missile that had just missed the Freedom Star. Through infrared sensors, the Venezuelan warship glowed bright against the cooler water, a predator outlined in heat and metal. The lead pilot's voice crackled across the encrypted channel. Target confirmed hostile, fire control radar active, permission to engage. The answer came seconds later from the George Washington's Combat Information Center. Engage per standing rules of engagement, protect civilian vessel, minimize collateral. Lightning from the clouds. The two F-35s accelerated to Mach 1, 2 closing the gap in under 2 minutes. The Guayre's crew, intent on preparing another launch, never saw the jets until their radar screens flashed a sudden, confusing bloom of signals, then blacked out completely. At 06:41 a.m., Viper 1 nosed down, acquiring a solid lock on the frigate's heat signature. 3 AMRAAM missiles released in sequence, each guided by GPS, radar, and infrared. The first penetrated the forward launcher deck, erupting in a fireball that shredded steel plating. The second slammed into the ship's midsection, destroying electrical conduits and plunging compartments into darkness. The third struck near the engineering deck, igniting stored fuel and setting off a chain reaction of explosions. The Guayre Avante 2400, once the pride of Venezuela's coastal defense, became a fire-wrapped silhouette within 30 seconds. Its communication antennas folded like straw, and flames speared 90 meters into the sky. The impact registered on seismic sensors in Trinidad. Chaos on deck. On board, panic took hold. Officers shouted conflicting orders as bulkheads ruptured and power failed. Sailors, some burned, some blinded by smoke, stumbled toward lifeboats amid raining debris. The captain tried to issue a mayday, but the radio was dead. The last transmission from the Guayre's bridge was a fragmented sentence, half lost in static, half drowned in fire. We are hit, eng. Moments later, the frigate's internal fuel line exploded, blowing open the starboard side and flooding the lower decks. The ship began to list heavily to port, engulfed by flames that turned the dawn sky a deep orange. From the bridge of the Freedom Star, Captain Hayes and his crew watched in stunned silence as the Venezuelan warship that had nearly killed them disintegrated. The roar of jets faded overhead, replaced by the hollow crackle of burning oil. The second target. But the mission was not yet over. On radar, Viper 2 detected a fast-moving aircraft fleeing north at 220 knots, the C-2 Arbouv Avio reconnaissance plane that had guided the attack. The pilot had seen the explosions below and was attempting to escape toward land. Without hesitation, Viper 2 climbed, locked, and fired a single AMRAAM. The missile found its mark within seconds. The C-212 vanished in a burst of light and scattered debris that rained over 2 miles of open ocean. A final radio check confirmed hostile air and sea threats neutralized, civilian vessel secure. 9 minutes after the first missile was fired, the battle was over. Reporting to command. At 06:48 a.m., a transmission reached U.S. Naval Command, Virginia. Freedom Star reporting. Enemy neutralized. Crew safe. Damage minimal. Continuing course to Houston. From that moment, the incident passed from a chaotic firefight to a global headline. In the command rooms of the Venezuelan Navy, silence fell. On the radar boards of Puerto Cabello, Two green dots, representing the Guayre and the Avio, blinked out and never returned. Technicians checked circuits, reset systems, and stared in disbelief. A communications officer finally broke the silence. "Sir, no response from Guayre, no transponder, no beacon, nothing." Across the operations table, the admiral removed his headset. He didn't need confirmation, he already knew. His fleet's pride was gone. The Caribbean holds its breath by 8 a.m. Satellite reconnaissance confirmed the wreckage. A drifting hull, leaking oil, debris spread across 11 nautical miles. Smoke rose in thick black pillars visible from Grenada and Barbados. The Venezuelan coastal force had lost a warship and a surveillance aircraft, over $310 million in hardware, 31 sailors dead, and more than 100 injured. The United States issued a statement within hours, backed by video evidence from an MQ-9 Reaper drone that had recorded the engagement from high altitude. The official message read, "The United States acted in defense of human life and lawful maritime commerce. Recklessness invites destruction. Precision ensures peace." The tone was measured, almost clinical, but the footage left little doubt about sequence. The Venezuelan frigate had fired first. Waves of reaction markets reacted instantly. Maritime insurers classified the southern Caribbean as a temporary high-risk zone, forcing shipping companies to reroute traffic through eastern corridors near Barbados and St. Lucia. The changes delayed voyages by weeks and cost millions in additional fuel and logistics. News outlets lit up with breaking alerts. U.S. tanker survives missile attack. Venezuelan Navy vessel destroyed after firing first. 9 minutes. That changed the Caribbean. In Washington, there were no cheers, only briefings. Defense officials emphasized restraint and legality. Diplomats quietly coordinated with allied governments to prevent further escalation. The message was consistent. The incident was over, and there would be no pursuit. A sea of ashes. By nightfall, the site of the attack was unrecognizable. Oil slicks shimmered under moonlight like dark mirrors. The carcass of the Guayre still burned faintly, its twisted frame half submerged. Nearby, floating debris from the downed C-212 drifted like fragments of a forgotten storm. The Freedom Star continued on its route, escorted now by the same F-35s that had saved it. The tanker's hull was scorched but intact, her engine still humming. For the 32 crew members, it was the longest voyage of their lives, 8 more days to Houston, each one shadowed by the memory of the explosion that could have ended them all. Yet, within the tragedy lay a silent victory. No civilian lives lost, no escalation beyond the battlefield, no second wave of attacks. The sea, once again, was quiet. Echoes in command rooms in Caracas, leaders reviewed satellite imagery with grim faces. The footage told an undeniable story. The frigate had initiated the engagement. Domestic broadcasts downplayed the loss, calling it an equipment failure. But sailors along the coast already knew the truth. Pride had collided with precision and paid the price. Behind closed doors, regional naval commanders began reassessing their doctrines. Analysts pointed out how advanced systems, stealth, network targeting, disciplined rules of engagement had completely overmatched older generation ships. In under 10 minutes, the balance of regional power had shifted from rhetoric to reality. 9 minutes, endless consequences. By the time the Freedom Star entered safer waters 2 days later, her decks had been cleaned and repairs underway, but her crew still carried the sound of that first explosion. Reporters would later call the encounter the 9-minute war, though it was less a battle and more a lesson. In the age of precision warfare, hesitation is fatal, but discipline is survival. When dawn rose again over the Caribbean, nothing looked different, yet everything had changed. The air was still, the water calm, but every sailor who crossed that region knew the sea now carried a warning etched in oil and fire. Power without judgment brings ruin. Precision guided by restraint brings peace. And on that morning in 2025, the ocean itself rendered the verdict. When the smoke finally cleared over the southern Caribbean, the warship was gone, the sea was quiet, and the morning sky, once filled with fire, turned a faint steel gray. It had taken 9 minutes to end a battle no one had declared. Yet those 9 minutes would ripple across the hemisphere for months. The incident was over, but its consequences were only beginning. Global shockwaves. By mid-morning on October 3rd, 2025, military analysts, diplomats, and investors across the world were reading the same brief. Venezuelan frigate Guayre Avante, 2400 sunk following attack on U.S. commercial tanker. U.S. aircraft confirmed engagement in self-defense. The headlines spread with the speed of panic. Oil futures jumped 3% in a single hour. Insurers tripled premiums for tankers entering Caribbean lanes. Cargo companies diverted hundreds of vessels eastward, burning millions of extra gallons of fuel. For Washington, the event was framed as a measured act of defense. For Caracas, it was a national tragedy cloaked in silence. For the world, it was proof that modern warfare no longer required days or even hours, just a few precise minutes. The official narrative. At a Pentagon press conference later that day, the Department of Defense released declassified footage from an MQ-9 Reaper drone showing the sequence of events: the Venezuelan radar lock, the missile launch, the near miss, and the retaliatory strike from the 2 F-35s. No dramatization, only timestamps and telemetry. A spokesperson summarized the findings with clinical restraint. The United States acted to protect human life and lawful commerce. No escalation is intended. Precision ensures peace. There was no applause, no celebration, only brief nods among journalists who understood the weight of what they had just seen. A warship destroyed in open water, a confrontation balanced on the edge of catastrophe. In Caracas, the tone was far more subdued. The government confirmed an accident at sea and promised an internal review, but eyewitnesses along the coast of Puerto Cabello had already filmed the smoke on the horizon. Within hours, the images circulated online, proof that something far more serious had occurred. The price of a misstep. Military experts from Brazil, Colombia, and Spain began dissecting the engagement in televised forums. Most agreed on one conclusion: the Guayre Avante was outmatched the moment it fired its first missile. Its automat Mk2 weapons were decades old, fast but blind compared to modern stealth aircraft. The Venezuelan crew never stood a chance. Their radar emissions, visible to U.S. sensors hundreds of miles away, had painted a perfect target. Once they fired, their position became a beacon in the sky. But beyond the technical lessons lay a more sobering truth. Communication failure kills faster than missiles. Had the Guayre confirmed the tanker's course through diplomatic channels or waited for identification, the engagement might never have happened. Instead, national pride and misinterpreted intent collided at sea, and pride sank faster than steel. A shattered fleet, a quiet sea. In the days that followed, Venezuelan rescue vessels scoured the area, recovering survivors clinging to lifeboats and wreckage. Of the 150 personnel aboard, 31 were confirmed dead or missing, while more than 100 were injured, many suffering burns and fractures. The charred hull of the Guayre was later found drifting eastward, its once sleek frame twisted and half-submerged, a grim reminder of how swiftly modern weaponry renders ships obsolete. The wreck was towed to shallow waters for investigation, but ultimately scuttled. International maritime organizations sent observers to monitor the environmental impact of the oil spill. Within a week, shimmering slicks stretched across 11 nautical miles, their rainbow sheen a haunting contrast to the calm blue around them. The Freedom Star, meanwhile, continued her voyage northward, escorted by 2 U.S. destroyers. Her crew, still shaken, reported minor hull damage, but no casualties. The tanker's safe arrival at Houston 4 days later became a symbol of endurance and discipline under fire, diplomacy under pressure. The diplomatic chain reaction was immediate. The Organization of American States, OAS, convened an emergency meeting in Washington. Both nations presented their cases, one invoking self-defense, the other sovereignty. The debate was tense but measured. Neither side wanted a repeat of the Cold War's maritime brinkmanship. Behind closed doors, quiet coordination began. The U.S. agreed to share radar data with regional allies to prevent misidentification of vessels in contested waters. Venezuela privately assured neighboring countries that no further intercepts would occur without higher-level authorization. By the end of the week, Operation Mariner Shield, a multinational patrol framework, was expanded to include Caribbean and South American observers. Its stated mission: to safeguard maritime commerce and prevent accidental escalation. For diplomats, it was damage control. For navies, it was a warning written in wreckage. Doctrine and discipline analysts studying the engagement noticed something striking. The U.S. response, while overwhelming, remained proportional. The F-35s fired only what was necessary, 3 missiles at one target, 1 at another, and disengaged immediately after. No further pursuit, no displays of dominance. This restraint, military scholars argued, had prevented a wider war. Rear Admiral James Colton, a naval strategist, later summarized the engagement in a classified seminar. Victory wasn't the destruction of the enemy vessel, it was the control exercised before and after. Precision guided the weapons, but discipline guided the men. In Caracas, surviving sailors told their own story. Many described chaos, confusion, and orders that changed by the minute. Some believed their targeting radar had been jammed, others that they were following a false signal. What united their testimonies was fear. Fear born not of battle, but of uncertainty. Modern warfare, they had learned, punishes hesitation as harshly as aggression. Economic and strategic fallout. For the global maritime economy, the repercussions were immediate. Shipping lanes near Venezuela were declared Category Red by major insurers, forcing fleets to reroute around the eastern Caribbean. The detours added days to voyages and millions to expenses. Ports that once thrived on traffic, like La Guayra and Puerto Cabello, grew eerily quiet. At the same time, energy analysts noted that the incident reaffirmed the vulnerability of oil transport routes. A single missile, fired in error, had disrupted trade patterns across an entire region. By the end of October, freight insurers, defense contractors, and international policy boards were all studying one question: what happens when the next misunderstanding occurs, not between frigates and tankers, but between superpowers? A lesson. Etched in water. The Freedom Star became more than a tanker. She became a symbol. Footage of her arrival in Houston, smoke-stained, escorted by silent fighter jets, was replayed on every major network. Commentators called her the ship that carried a warning. Captain Walter Hayes, who had refused to panic under fire, declined interviews. In his only public statement, he said simply, "My crew did what they were trained to do. We stayed calm, and we trusted the system." That made the difference. Naval academies across the world soon added the encounter to their curriculum, not as an example of triumph, but as a study in controlled response, intelligence integration, and the human factor in crisis. Reflections on the horizon. Weeks later, as the sun set over the still-scarred Caribbean, the surface of the sea glowed faintly from residual oil and soot. Fishermen in nearby islands still spoke of that morning, the sky that burned and the thunder that rolled without warning. For Venezuela, the loss became a national wound and a point of reflection. For the United States, it was a reaffirmation of its doctrine: peace through precision, deterrence through discipline. But for the world's maritime community, it was a sober truth carved into the water itself. Power without clarity invites disaster. Power with control ensures survival. And somewhere beyond that horizon, new vessels sailed the same route. Quietly, cautiously, aware that the sea remembers. The wrecks below the waves were no longer just metal. They were memorials to pride, to restraint, and to the fragile balance that keeps the world at peace. In just 9 minutes, a single confrontation at sea reshaped how the world views modern warfare. What began as a tense encounter between a Venezuelan warship and an American tanker became a living demonstration of a hard truth. Technology may define the battlefield, but discipline decides the outcome. The Freedom Star's survival was not just a military success, it was proof that calm judgment, rigorous training, and adherence to law can prevent chaos even when seconds separate peace from destruction. The F-35 pilots did not act out of vengeance. They acted within precise rules of engagement. Their response, swift yet restrained, turned potential catastrophe into a case study for every navy on Earth. Beyond missiles and radar, this story is a reflection of how fragile stability really is, and how easily pride, fear, or miscommunication can ignite disaster. The Caribbean that day became more than a battleground. It became a mirror, reflecting the cost of recklessness and the quiet strength of restraint. As the Freedom Star continued her course toward Houston, the lesson followed her across the waves. Power without judgment leads to ashes, but precision guided by reason preserves peace. If you believe these stories matter, if you want clear, verified insight into the events that shape our world at sea, then stay with us. Like this video, share it with others who value truth over noise, and subscribe to Military Worldline News, where every report transforms conflict into understanding, and every mission reminds us what discipline truly means.